Hi there, folks. Welcome to the program. This, of course, is Stinchfield, the podcast. So great to be along with you. I'm excited about this conversation. Tylenol, the vaccines, autism rates, problems with taking Tylenol during your pregnancy that could lead to the child's autism, the vaccine, and then giving children Tylenol after they've taken the vaccine. What's the correlation there? Is there a possibility that this Tylenol being blamed is actually a smokescreen to take the focus away from the vaccine? Possibility. We're going to talk about all of this today, and I'm excited to do it because I want to break down what's fact and fiction. You know, I was talking to my very special lady friend. She's got 3 kids. She says it used to be Tylenol was the only thing you could take when you were pregnant, that your doctor said this is the only safe drug to take, and now it comes out that maybe it's not. So let's get to the bottom of this. Fact, fiction, maybe we don't know, and maybe we'll look at the science. So I've got a very important doctor. Our good friend, Dr. Kelly Victory, is here with The Wellness Company. The Wellness Company, of course, is the sponsor of today's podcast, twc.health/grant. This is the prescription medication kit I want you to have in your house. If you do not have one of these, you are not prepared for whatever might come your way. We know that cyber attacks, natural disasters, terror attacks, power outages could shut down drugstores. Do you have prescription medications on hand that could save you or your family member's life? You need to. twc.health/grant, and a whole slew of products like the Parasite Cleanse. You want to get rid of these worms, parasites in your stomach, ringworm, all this stuff. It's a detox, man, and I went through it, and it's great. Sold out 3 times, back in stock, twc.health/grant. Use the promo code GRANT. All right, with that, let's get this show started.
Uncensored and unapologetic. This is Stinchfield. Here's your host, Grant Stinchfield.
All right, so I told you that we're going to get to the truth. And one of the doctors that I trust the most, so many of the Wellness Company doctors, but you, Dr. Victory, you know, you're always here when I got tough questions, and I appreciate that. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, as always, for having me, Grant.
All right, so every mother is now freaked out after yesterday's news conference. Let me just, to set the stage here, let me just play President Trump, and then we'll talk about this.
Tylenol during pregnancy can be associated with a very increased risk of autism. So taking Tylenol is not good. All right, I'll say it. It's not good. For this reason, they are strongly recommending that women limit Tylenol use during pregnancy unless medically necessary.
All right, Dr. Victor, let me set it up this way. I certainly trust President Trump. I trust Bobby Kennedy Jr. My first reaction wasn't even towards the science. I just said, oh, gosh, this is going to cause us a headache because it's Tylenol. It's like one of the most widely used medications out there, over the counter, Acetaminophen. I was like, this. And then, you know, you start to think about it. Does it still come back to the vaccines? And I wonder if you can lay out where you are with this, because you sent me the term, the Tylenol Smoke Screen, Operation Tylenol Smoke Screen.
Absolutely. And thanks for bringing up this important topic. Obviously, Grant, the press conference yesterday was supposed to be about exposing what they have learned about the cause or root causes of the autism epidemic that we are clearly facing. To say that I was disappointed is an understatement. I did reference it as Operation Tylenol Smoke Screen for a reason. And let me get on the record. Look, Tylenol, acetaminophen, is not a remarkably safe drug. It does have liver toxicity, and frankly, there are more overdoses and deaths from Tylenol by an order of magnitude than there ever were, for example, from a drug like ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine. It is not without its issues. But I think the idea of pinning the autism epidemic on Tylenol, frankly, is preposterous. The reality is that Tylenol, it was first formulated in the late 1800s. It came into common use in the 1950s and was used during the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s when autism was frankly almost, unheard of. It was very, very rare compared to today. It was, and it remains to today, or till yesterday, the only safe drug to be taken for fever and pain during pregnancy. Aspirin and the nonsteroidals, things like ibuprofen or naproxen sodium, are contraindicated during pregnancy. So Tylenol was the mainstay. So during the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, women were taking Tylenol during pregnancy, and children were taking Tylenol also when it became in common usage for everything from fever to pain. Yet we weren't seeing these autism rates. So all of a sudden, fast forward, if you say that, back in 1960, rates of autism were somewhere in the range of 1 in 10,000 births. Then by the year 1980, it was, 1 in, it was way less than that. And by 2000, it was 1 in 150. Now, this past year, we're at something like 1 in 30, at births, the child is diagnosed with autism. So what changed starting in the late 1980s? And I would submit to you, it wasn't the use of Tylenol. Something else changed in the 1980s. And it was really as a result of the Childhood Vaccine Injury Act that had been passed in 1986, where we all of a sudden saw this incredible uptick in the introduction of new vaccines, the frequency of the vaccines. And that's when we started this trajectory of children taking not the 6 to 8 vaccines that you and I took between birth and age 18, but all of a sudden landing us where we are today, where a child is expected to take 80 plus vaccines between birth and age 18. So I am not saying, I'm not saying that there isn't a potential relationship between taking Tylenol and autism, but it has to do with the timing of it concomitant with the vaccine.
Let me ask you this, because I clearly have seen evidence, as you have, that the overwhelming number of vaccines seems to be the problem. We'll get into that. President Trump talked about splitting up the MMR vaccine, and the number of vaccines seems to be a problem. Then you introduce Tylenol. When the kid has a vaccine, he then gets a fever, then he takes Tylenol.
Right.
Could the Tylenol be somehow an accelerator to the neurologic issue that we're seeing with the vaccine? Or there's other things that have burst onto the scene in the 1980s. I mean, you talk about sugary foods and the horrible things that we're putting in our bodies. And you talk about, I don't know whether it would be pollution that's causing it, but there's a lot of things that you could say, okay, well, these increased in the 1980s along with vaccines. How do we decide which is the one factor that's now responsible for the autism?
Well, you're right. I don't discount any of the potential environmental exposures, but I think you hit the nail on the head where you suggested that Tylenol may be a potentiating factor, meaning Tylenol is metabolized through the liver. It changes liver metabolism, including things like glutathione, and how those things therefore can affect neurologic development, or how folate is absorbed in the brain. So Tylenol has a metabolic impact. And I believe that it's the timing of the Tylenol along with the vaccine that's the problem. I think if you were to remove one thing, however, from the equation to decrease the risk of autism, it would be the vaccines, not the acetaminophen. So if you look back at what we're talking about during pregnancy, if women take Tylenol because they have a toothache during pregnancy, or they take Tylenol because they have a low-grade fever from a cold during pregnancy, I do not believe that you could prove any relationship with autism. It's when women go and get a vaccine, and giving vaccines to pregnant women is something that really started about 25 years ago. Prior to that, we really rarely, if ever, gave a vaccine to a pregnant woman. So this woman now is encouraged to go get her flu vaccine. She gets the flu vaccine. She's pregnant. She develops, not only a sore arm, but some muscle aches and a low-grade fever. And she's told to take what? Tylenol. Okay. That is the risk. Likewise, when young children are given Tylenol because they're fussy and teething, they don't develop autism. When they fall and scrape their knee and are given Tylenol, they don't develop autism. It's when they go and get their MMR vaccine and come home with a fever and are irritable, get Tylenol. That's the connection.
Is it pretty quickly that they develop the autism after that happens, the fever, the Tylenol, autism?
I'll tell you, if anybody knows the stories of mothers of autistic children, it's Robert Kennedy Jr. That is what motivated him back when he formed Children's Health Defense. It was those stories that were clear. Listen to the mothers. They will tell you, my child was normal, was meeting the milestones, interacting, making eye contact, developing verbal skills. We got the vaccines that day at the doctor's office. The child was inconsolable that night and never made eye contact again. There was a profound change. It was like flipping a switch. I didn't used to believe it until we had to stop gaslighting those parents. They were right. There was a temporal connection with getting that vaccine, and it wasn't subtle.
Well, look, these mothers, I've heard them tell the stories. It's heart-wrenching, to say the least. I feel blessed. My son, he's 16 years old. He went through the whole vaccine schedule, and he seems to be doing pretty well. All right, we're talking about causation here. And so President Trump brought up the Amish community. They basically don't take any of these things, Tylenol or vaccines, and listen to what he said about that.
The Amish, virtually, I heard none. See, Bobby wants to be very careful with what he says, and he should, but I'm not so careful with what I say. But you have certain groups. The Amish, as an example, they have essentially no autism. First... All
right, so, virtually none. They're not getting vaccinated, and I'm not sure Amish are taking Tylenol either.
Well, it's a good question. Robert Kennedy Jr. and Brian Hooker did a great expose in their book, Vaxxed, Unvaxxed, Let the Data Speak, where they actually looked at communities of completely non-vaccinated people, which certainly include the Amish, and they compared the rates of all kinds of illnesses, not just autism, by the way. Everything from asthma to ear infections, eczema, all kinds of things. And they found that in those populations that had never taken a vaccine, they found profoundly decreased incidence of all of these things. And as President Trump said, a fundamentally zero incidence of autism. Now, in my own clinical experience, I treated many, many Amish patients. I lived in Ohio, where there's large Amish communities in Ohio and Pennsylvania. And I can tell you that the patients I treated did take Tylenol. So I can't speak to them as an entire population, but I was unaware that they didn't take Tylenol because certainly my patients did.
All right. And I could easily be confusing them with, Christian Scientists or something like that doesn't, that would be just like me to do something like that, quite frankly. All right. So here's the other question for you. And I'm going to play devil's advocate to my own podcast. The podcast title, the Tylenol Smoke Screen, is this just an excuse to cover up for Big Pharma? Bobby Kennedy's not going to cover for Big Pharma. So what's the motivation here to just lay this out on Tylenol? And I will say this. I almost feel bad for Tylenol because it's acetaminophen. There are other companies that make acetaminophen, and Tylenol got labeled in on all of this. But what would be the motivation for Bobby Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the most anti-Big Pharma guy, to come out with something that may be a cover for Big Pharma?
Well, obviously, I was not behind the curtain there, but I can tell you my assessment of the press conference. After everything, the lead up to it, that, we're going to make this big announcement. It's going to be the biggest press conference of my administration about HHS. I had the sense that the press conference was very disjointed. They seemed a bit discombobulated. They were not well rehearsed in what they were saying. And I had the feeling, and that's all it was, Grant, that they received some information before walking into that room and maybe were told to tone it down. Do not give this indictment of specifically the vaccines, because they all were sort of dancing around it. They dip a toe in the water, but then they'd back off. So they gave some indication that they were willing and open to looking at the vaccine connection. But then they'd come back and say, yeah, but then about Tylenol, let's talk some more about acetaminophen. So what's the motivation? I suspect it's the same age-old motivation as ever. Money, power, pressure, influence from Big Pharma. They are the
really
behemoth.
Be influenced by these folks. I mean, my Lord, if this is the case, I lose all faith that, here we have the right people in there. And then now what you're telling me is there's a possibility they're compromised too.
Well, I trust Robert Kennedy Jr. Truly with this. I believe that he's absolutely genuine in his commitment to getting to the bottom of it. But he doesn't necessarily get to do it on our timeline. So he may well have to be a little bit more cautious, a little bit more judicious with his comments, and slow it down a bit. I am hopeful, I remain hopeful that they will expose ultimately the true culprit. And as I said, I believe that the data, the timelines, the evidence points far more to the common theme being the vaccines, and specifically the timing and the frequency of them, rather than the Tylenol itself. Right. Again, we still need to do things like address the adjuvants in those vaccines, like aluminum and mercury and that sort of stuff, which both are neurotoxins as well.
We'll get to that in a minute, because I did bring all of that up. Let me play a clip from Bobby Kennedy Jr. to really explain what they did here, because they didn't take Tylenol off the market. And that's almost what it seems like is being pushed out there, that it's banned from anybody or banned from pregnant women taking it. And that's not really what happened. This is what he did.
Today, the FDA will issue a physician's notice about the risk of acetaminophen during pregnancy and begin the process to initiate a safety label change. HHS will launch a nationwide public service campaign to inform families and protect public health. FDA also recognized that acetaminophen is often the only tool for fevers and pain in pregnancy, as other alternatives have well-documented adverse effects. HHS wants, therefore, to encourage clinicians to exercise their best judgment in the use of acetaminophen for fevers and pain in pregnancy by prescribing the lowest effective dose for the shortest necessary duration.
All right. So lowest dose, shortest duration. But if I'm a mom, thankfully I'm not, and I'm not going to ever be pregnant. But if I was, okay, and I was female, I'm probably not going to take Tylenol now after this, because I trust Kennedy and I trust Trump and I trust the others that are standing behind him. Just out of caution, I don't need Tylenol's not that great that it's going to help with your pain. Believe me, I got aches and pains, and Tylenol ain't doing it for me. So I can get away with no Tylenol. Do you think pregnant women should not be taking Tylenol? Should you not be giving Tylenol to your kid if he gets a fever, especially after he gets a shot?
Well, I think you're correct in terms of your assessment of the effect that this announcement is going to have, Grant. I think women are going to be scared to death to take Tylenol for fear that they are going to induce a neurologic injury in their unborn child.
You know, I'll say this, though, Dr. Victor. You mark my words. You're going to have left-wing women who were exactly where the conservative women are today about vaccines, but just because it's Trump and conservative movement, they're going to be popping Tylenol like Tic Tacs just to prove Trump wrong.
Well, I will tell you that the good thing is in what Robert Kennedy Jr. is, could have said here, but he's right that we should always prescribe the lowest possible dose to receive efficacy. There's no question, people probably have been a little willy-nilly. The vast majority of the population believes that Tylenol is absolutely safe, that it's like candy, that there's no problem. And as I said, the reality is there have been far more overdoses and deaths caused by Tylenol over the years than almost any other drug on the market, other than things like fentanyl. It is not uncommon, for example, for a young person to commit what they consider to be a suicide gesture, meaning that I took a bunch of Tylenol thinking that it was completely innocuous, and then they end up with terminal liver failure. Tylenol is not a super great, safe drug, and it shouldn't be taken willy-nilly. That said, I do not believe that the preponderance of the literature, of the research out there, really makes any significant connection to Tylenol during pregnancy leading to autism specifically. There was a single study, I think in 2008, that made a connection. I'm not saying that Tylenol is a super safe drug and everyone should take a handful with breakfast. That's not it. We should always limit. On the other hand, it is the only medication right now currently for pregnant women to take for whatever it is. And if you're a pregnant person who, falls and breaks your wrist, okay, are you just telling that woman she should take nothing for pain? She should have nothing? She can't take aspirin. She can't take ibuprofen. You certainly don't want her taking narcotics. Pregnant women actually have injuries. You know what happens. So it's not just for a fever. It's for other things.
In my experience, now this is a former college football player, was 56 with all kinds of aches and pains. Tylenol didn't work for me. It didn't even come close. I had that herniated disc in my neck. They gave me an accelerated dose of acetaminophen, one of the big prescription. Did nothing for me. So I don't know. I don't think that pregnant women, boy, if you're watching this, I don't know how you go and take Tylenol. Now it's the only thing you can take. It's off the board for me. I mean, I'm just going to say I want to find out definitively before I put anything in my body that could harm my baby. Hey, real quick.
Hang on, let me just interject there. If I were a pregnant woman, I would be far more concerned personally about taking any vaccines during pregnancy. 100%. I have a lot more concerns because we didn't really do that at all before about 25 years ago. I think it's an unwise decision. Unless there is some overwhelming necessity, I can't imagine a rationale for giving a pregnant woman a vaccine. So if you're going to eliminate one thing from the mix during a pregnancy, for my money, it would be any vaccines rather than Tylenol.
We agree on that 100% for sure. Hey, let me ask you before I'm going to get into the vaccine schedule and spreading some of them out. They talked about that MMRV as they give it one dose. They said it should be 3 or 4 doses. We'll talk about that. But before I do, we always talk about ivermectin. The wellness company now has an ivermectin cream. Can you tell me, Dr. Victory, what this is good for? I'm going to put the website up so people can go and get it. But this ivermectin cream, again, ivermectin just seems to be like a wonder drug for everything. Can you explain to me why this is so important and so great that the wellness company now has this?
Well, the reality is we have learned so much about ivermectin, frankly, in part because of COVID and its incredible sort of efficacy against the COVID virus. We now know, and it's been used in the veterinary world for the treatment of cancers for many, many decades, and we're finding out that it actually has significant efficacy against a lot of human cancers. It turns out also that in the topical form, this cream that you're talking about, ivermectin is effective in treating a host of different skin conditions. People have had relief of everything from psoriasis and eczema to skin cancers. Some squamous cell and basal cell cancers have been reduced in size or gone away entirely. It's been used to treat infections like impetigo, which is generally a strep infection on the skin commonly seen in babies. And it's very, very safe. So many, many more studies need to be done on this. But for the time being, we know that we have a formulation that's incredibly safe and has shown great effectiveness. And you can treat it topically, meaning you can put the medication just on the skin lesion or the skin issue, and you don't have to take something orally that goes through your entire body. So you're able to limit any potential side effects by simply applying it topically.
So is it something good to have in your home?
I think so, and I think actually I'm trying it for a number of different things. I think that it's worth trying on skin cancers or things that are sort of pre-cancers, rather than necessarily needing everything to be surgically removed by a dermatologist in the office. There are many people, again, as I said, who have used it successfully to treat impetigo and other skin infections where you don't then have to take an oral antibiotic. So I think it's worth having on hand. It's extraordinarily safe in the topical form. It's safe in the oral form as well if used in the common dosaging. But in the topical form, I have seen zero ill effects. And as I said, I'm hoping we will conduct more studies. But in the meantime, I think it's absolutely worth having.
All right, this is great. You can get it at twc.health/grant. Use the promo code GRANT. The website is right there underneath your screen where Dr. Victory is there. All right, so now I want to talk about what they're doing with the vaccine schedule. This is President Trump again.
They've already taken out and are in the process of taking out mercury and aluminum now. You know what mercury is. You know what aluminum is. Who the hell wants that pumped into a body? And there were rumors about both of them for a long time. But we're having them taken out. We're having them taken out of the vaccines.
So I think President Trump speaks for all of us when he's just a plain talker. Who the hell wants mercury in your vaccine? I mean, but it's so true. You know, when you first hear about that, we have mercury in the vaccines. Now, I remember when I was a kid, I'd break open the mercury thermometer and I'd play with the little stuff on the floor. Like, how bad was that I was? Then they take mercury out of thermometers because it's so dangerous. Here I was rolling it around in my fingers. They're putting this in vaccines.
Absolutely. You know, you're advised not to eat certain fish because of high mercury levels, yet you should have your, 2-month-old baby injected with it. Mercury was originally added to vaccines as a preservative in the form of thimerosal. Aluminum was added for a very different reason. It was really added specifically because it is known to cause a massive immune response. And it was believed that by injecting a small amount of aluminum along with the vaccine, you would enhance the immune response that you developed, and the vaccine would somehow become more effective. Both of them, however, both mercury and aluminum, are known neurotoxins. And the idea that we would be injecting this, particularly, we may have gotten away with it, Grant, when you and I were getting, back on the 6 to 8 vaccines, as I said, over an 18-year period, getting 6 to 8 of these micro injections. But when the vaccine schedule now includes 84 shots that a baby is supposed to get from the day of birth until age 18, 84 injections, turns out you don't have those degrees of freedom anymore. And any amount of a neurotoxin given that many times can be devastating.
Yeah, it sounds unbelievable to me. Let me play you a throwback. I find this so interesting because, as I mentioned, I'm sure all the liberal women will now be popping Tylenols just to prove President Trump wrong. But what a switch we've gone through, right? Like, it used to be the hippies on the left were no vaccines and the conservatives were like, just trust the doctors. And now we've completely switched. This is Jenny McCarthy and Jim Carrey. Now, I think Jenny McCarthy may actually be a conservative. Jim Carrey, I doubt it. But this is them on with Larry King, and nothing has changed. And I don't know, I think it's like 16 years ago this was.
I don't know what happened in 1990. There was no plague that was killing children that we had to triple the amount of vaccines.
What happened after
smart.
1989?
The
Why
did they
triple? It warranted 26 more vaccines.
Agreed.
Are all of them absolutely necessary?
Because they want to make money.
Of course.
It's twice as many as anywhere else in 30 countries in the Western world.
But
we give twice as many shots as any of those countries. Why is that?
Well, what are you against? Don't vaccinate for this, but vaccinate for that?
Yes.
I think we have to choose which ones are absolutely necessary.
You should educate yourself. We want to empower parents to educate themselves. Do we need to have the chickenpox? Do we need the hepatitis B shot on the second day of life?
I don't think we can afford to assume that the people who are charged with our public health any longer have our best interest at heart all the time. Parents have to make their own decisions educated decisions. They have to look at the information.
Space out the vaccines, delay them till after one, clean out the toxins that are in them. We don't need that many.
Why would a doctor not want to know more about something that could save a life or prevent a disease? I don't understand.
The AAP is financed by the drug companies. Medical schools are financed by the drug companies. This is a huge business. Vaccines are the largest growing division of the pharmaceutical industry. $13 billion.
They control
profit.
medical schools.
What we're asking is for them to take a loss for the good of our children.
I don't want anyone taking a loss, but I'll tell you this. I never thought Dr. Kelly Victory and Jim Carrey would be in agreement. He sounds like he talked talking points from you.
100%. And we don't share anything else in common, but he is spot on. Jim Carrey is speaking the truth there, and he's absolutely correct. What changed in the late 1980s, as I said before, was the Childhood Vaccine Injury Act that was passed by Congress in 1986. It specifically was to encourage pharmaceutical companies to investigate and research and develop additional vaccines. And the way that they enticed them to do that was by giving them blanket immunity, meaning you cannot be sued if something goes sideways, if somebody is harmed or, God forbid, killed as a result of your vaccine. And therefore, all of a sudden, the pharmaceutical companies started cranking out vaccine after vaccine for everything under the sun. And the reality is you cannot vaccinate your way to good health. We've been led to believe that, you just need one more vaccine and you will have a good and healthy life. And we have gotten away from all of the basics that hopefully MAHA is bringing back. Things like solid nutrition, daily exercise, adequate sleep, stress mitigation, all of those things that we know actually enhance the functioning of the immune system. But there's no money to be made in that. And so Jim Carrey is absolutely right in that clip. If that was 16 years ago, you are correct. Nothing has changed since then. Furthermore, both he and Jenny McCarthy are correct when they say that the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, ACOG, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, they are funded by Big Pharma. They are paid millions of dollars to continue the narrative that these vaccines are safe, effective, and necessary.
These are all things that I started talking about during the COVID outbreak and when all the questions started surrounding it. And then I started getting deeper and deeper into it, and I listened to what they said. And I said, my Lord, they warned us 16 years ago, the exact warning that I started giving 4 years ago. It's really quite amazing. Where are their voices now? I'm sure Jenny McCarthy would but she's probably been silenced by the media. Jim Carrey's probably afraid to speak out. I haven't seen him speak out recently on this. Have you?
No, I haven't seen any of them. And they're, people I keep hoping are more and more aware of this. And let me also get on the table. I've been very honest over the past 5 or 6 years. I used to be considered a vaccine zealot. I spoke and wrote prolifically on the importance of vaccines because I had been led to believe, I had been misled to believe, I'd been mistaught in medical school, like my colleagues, that vaccines were the panacea, that vaccines were, for example, what drove down the death rate and the incidence of polio and measles. That simply is not the fact. Wow. The incidence of polio had plummeted, and deaths from polio were almost at zero before the polio vaccine was ever launched on the public. That is the fact, and that is not what we were taught in medical school.
Yep, I've confirmed those numbers as well. Dr. Victor, it's always great to have you on. This is a very important conversation because a lot of ladies are going to be asking questions about what they should be doing, and I think this is helpful for everybody, as always, when you come on. I appreciate you, and it's always great to see you.
Thanks, as always, for having me, Grant.
Absolutely. So, folks, we'll continue to follow this. It's an important conversation that we need to really get to the bottom of. I'm just glad people are talking about it. You talk about chronic diseases. The United States Senate was never talking about chronic diseases before President Trump and Bobby Kennedy Jr. came on board and talking about getting healthy. It's so important that we do that. Speaking of getting healthy, the Wellness Company has so many products that'll help you do that. the spike support product to get that spike protein out of your system if you took the vaccine. TWC.health/Grant. There's methylene blue. I'm taking that. Man, what a energy booster. I feel fabulous on the methylene blue, and it's one of the best methylene blue products out there, if not the best, coming from the wellness company. They always make sure that all their products are 100% up to standard, which is great. TWC.health/Grant. Use that promo code GRANT for 10% off. The prescription medical kits are great, and the parasite cleanse. Get yourself on a detox, okay? Get the ringworms out. Get all the nastiness out of your system. TWC.health/Grant. Use that promo code GRANT for 10% off. I will see y'all on the Real America's Voice show tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to continue this conversation. President Trump addresses the UN, and Jimmy Kimmel back on air tonight. We will preview that on the Rav show, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stinchfield's Army Rolls. We'll see you tonight.